Fenlon, we meet again. And again. And again.
I grow tired of your visits, cat.
As do I, you slut.
You are a slut.
You're a slut.
You are the slut.
Cat, ready to dance.
I'm always ready.
Fenlongo, I've missed our chats.
Shut up and fight.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Chantel Cameron outpoints Kotaskova to become a two-weight world champion, sort of happening in the background of this past weekend's action. Chantel continues to rack up the wins and pile on the accolades, as she is now a two-weight world champion, having been undisputed at 140. Currently WBO champion at 154. The fight that Chantel fought in was for 3-minute rounds. MVP's continued push to normalize 3-minute rounds in a women's boxing match. Previously, it had been suggested that 3-minute rounds would produce more stoppages in women's boxing, but despite throwing everything at Kotaskova, 27-year-old Cameron was unable to secure the stoppage that she craved. Instead, she had to settle for a lopsided decision with the judges, who returned cards of 100-90, and two judges had it 99-91 in Chantel's favor. Cameron had been out of the ring since last July, when she widely outpointed Jessica Kimura in defense of her interim WBC super lightweight title at Madison Square Garden. She was then elevated to full champion 2 months later when Katie Taylor was made the champion in recess. The World Boxing Council ordered Cameron to immediately defend her belt against fellow Brit Sandy Ryan, but she decided to vacate the belt, citing her desire to box over 3-minute rounds, which the WBC is against. She was granted that opportunity for this fight against Kotaskova for the vacant WBO junior middleweight title, the WBO not having the hardline stance on 3-minute rounds that the WBC does. They're not against it. So Chantel got her opportunity to box for 10 threes, but she had to jump 2 divisions to do it. The size difference was stark once the action started with Kotaskova, who was 3 pounds heavier on the scales, enjoying significant height and reach advantages over Chantel. But that did not alter Chantel's trademark approach, applying pressure behind a high guard while Kotaskova attempted to keep the fight at long range where she could control her shorter opponent. After an uneventful opener, the fight opened up in the second, with both women landing good right hands. Cameron was beginning to close the gap more regularly and targeted the body of Kotaskova in a bid to slow her down. It was clearly working, and by the fourth, the Czech visitor appeared to be unraveling as Cameron chased her around the ring. The pattern continued throughout the mid-rounds, with Cameron slowly grinding down the Vienna resident, who was also boxing at junior middle for the first time after having spent the first 13 fights of her career as a welter. She did well to maintain her composure under almost constant pressure from Cameron over the course of 3-minute rounds. Even so, she didn't do enough to win any of the rounds, and the judges agreed after 10 were complete. Afterwards, Cameron faced off with the current WBA and WBC junior middleweight champion Michaela Mayer, with the pair heading towards a unification clash later this year. Michaela Mayer holds alphabet titles in 2 separate weight classes, but the fight with Chantel being dubbed a unification match, that lets you know where it's going to be. It's going to be at 154, because that's the only division where both she and Chantel hold alphabet titles. The WBO title that Chantel Cameron just fought for and won is the same one that Michaela used to hold. But after Michaela Mayer beat Sandy Ryan for the WBO at 147, the WBO have a rule. They're not going to let any one of their champions hold 2 versions of their titles at 2 separate weights, so they made her choose, and she did. She chose to keep the one at 147 to drop the one at 154, at which point Chantel Cameron comes along, picks it up. Now she hopes to unify it with the 2 belts Michaela's got at junior middle. I don't think Chantel Cameron wins that fight. I think if and when the time comes, she's opposite the ring Michaela Mayer, Michaela's gonna be too much for her. I've been watching Chantel Cameron from the moment she debuted as a pro, and I have to say in recent years, she's regressed. She's not getting better. She's flattened out.
Plateaued.
Where Michaela seems to be getting better fight by fight, having gotten her start all the way down there at 135, 130.
Just spending a good number of years down there, it would seem that moving up in weight has really suited Michaela Mayer's statuesque frame, allowed her to fill out and fight at a healthier weight, resulting in a stronger,
More energetic, more violent fighter, not leaving so much of herself in the gym, in camp, to make the weight. Fighting at these higher weights has helped make her a better fighter. And I think she's got the edge over Chantel, who hasn't impressed me. She hasn't impressed me in a long time.
Chantel's been bouncing from trainer to trainer to trainer so much over the years. Now she's back with Nigel Travis and Jamie Moore, likely trying to recapture her old form.
But I don't think it's going to help. When the time comes and she's opposite the ring Michaela, I'm giving the edge to Michaela. Didn't seem to take Michaela long.
After the collapse of the Price fight,
And the supposed Shields fight in the middleweight division, it didn't take Michaela long to find a new dance partner.
yeah, she did say that if things don't work out with Lauren, she can always fight Chantel. They're both on the MVP side of things.
You could do that fight in the United States just as easily as you could do that fight in the United Kingdom, because MVP has broadcast deals with both ESPN Plus and Sky Sports.
Do that fight.
They're going to do that fight, and when they do, I like Michaela Mayer to win a points decision in a barn burner, in a grinder.
When you're part of the promotion, okay, because that's what Haney was going to be, a part of the promotion. He got Haney Promotions. You know, you have to take risks, okay? You being the fighter and the promoter. You know, Rolly was willing to take risks too, and willing to bet on himself. What does that mean, Tim? Bet on himself. Well, he was gonna take a small little lump sum up front, and he believed that the pay-per-view and the venue would sell. That's what he believed. It will sell. Haney and them don't believe it's gonna sell. They don't. They want they guaranteed money. You know, when you negotiate a contract, you usually put a limit amount of money that you're guaranteed. All right, I'm guaranteed $6 million no matter what. No matter what happens, $6 million. You know, and that's all you get. That's all you get. Yeah, $6 million guaranteed. That's all you get. The Haneys are looking for something like that. They not looking to, you know, hope and think, and they just want their money up front. No, I want $7 million guaranteed no matter what, or whatever the number is, okay? And they're saying, no, we can't do that.
Well, that accents two things primarily. About the Haneys, about the current state of affairs at the PBC. What have I been telling you? They don't have any fucking money.
Whatever little bit of money they got, they ain't gonna fritter it away on Devin Haney.
The situation says about the Haneys is that they finally worn out their welcome, because for the longest time, Devin Haney has been getting paid in excess of his market value. Money he's not actually good for, that if you give it to him, his fight ain't gonna generate it.
We all know where and when it started, so we don't need to get into all of that.
Point is, in Devin Haney not attaching himself to a promotional outfit, he has no financial backing, and thus he is forced to rely on his own marquee value, which he doesn't have. He may be one of the most talked about fighters online.
People talk about a lot of things online. Do they spend money for them?
Here's an example. There's a cat goes by the name Maxwell. Literally a cat, with a GoPro camera fashioned to his neck. And he runs around the neighborhood getting into fights with other cats. I follow him on Instagram.
This is a very popular page on Instagram. Very popular. Online.
Where it don't cost nothing for somebody to follow somebody else. Online popularity doesn't always translate into real-world dollars, and thus is the case with Devin.
Yeah, it's all well and good to follow Maxwell's Instagram page while you're bed rotting and scrolling through the reels.
But you wouldn't get up and go to the movies to see that kind of content. You wouldn't pay movie theater prices to see that kind of content, and thus is the case with Devin.
People talk about him online. I talk about him online. They talk about him on X, on Instagram, on YouTube. Yeah.
He's online famous, but not real world famous.
So the PBC's not gonna break the proverbial piggy bank to pay him what he wants, and he isn't gonna fight without a guarantee.
A big one.
To make that fight with Rolly Romero happen, Devon's gotta be willing to bet on himself.
Not just that he'll win. That's grade school logic.
He's gotta bet on his own marquee value, that if they get the fight over the line, it will generate capital.
He's got to bet on himself.
Look, the same thing happened with Crawford, right? Crawford, when he was getting ready to fight Spence, Crawford was looking for a guarantee. And Heyman was like, hey, you can make more money this way. If the fight sells, if you're as big as you say you are, you can make more money this way, you know? You don't need a guarantee, you know? You take this lump sum up front, you get money on the back end with the ticket sales and, you know, the pay-per-view revenue that comes in. And you have an opportunity to generate a shitload of money and get your percentage for it. So Crawford took that risk and they made out. You know, I heard it was like 25 million a piece, something like that, you know, between him and Earl Spence. You know, now they're asking, since, hey, Haney is the big time and Haney is this and Haney is that and Haney sells and all this stuff. Well, hey, you know what? Show us. That's all I'm going to tell you. Show us.
And he's not going to, because he knows better. In truth, they're both right, the PBC and the Haneys.
The PBC are right not to pay this kid a fortune because they can't afford to, and he's not good for it. He's not good for the money he's asking for.
And he's right not to fight without a guaranteed cash up front, because if you're relying on sales of the pay-per-view to pay you, you ain't gonna get paid.
People ain't buying pay-per-views anywhere near as much as they used to, and they're not really likely to buy this one, not with piracy being at an all-time high. Thus, it's actually smart of him to not fight without a guarantee.
Even if it costs him this fight.
They want too much money, and that's the real problem. It's not just Devon, it's also Rolly. To do this, you would have to bill it as a pay-per-view where neither champion is pay-per-view worthy.
It's inflation. What does it say that to satisfy the financial demands of both teams, you have to kick out more money than the event is worth? Clearly, that's not sustainable.
And you can't really expect Devon to take the same gamble that Terence Crawford did with Spence, because Crawford and Spence was the biggest fight at welterweight at the time. It was a fight that a lot of people were clamoring for, whereas this
is not that.
It's not the modern equivalent of Crawford versus Spence. This is nowhere near as big. Nobody's really asking for it. Now, you could do it because it's a unification match.
But you shouldn't have to break the bank to do it. You should be able to do it at a reasonable price, except the fighter's demands are unreasonable.
So here we are, at a stalemate. I'm not broken up about it because Devon Haney's fights are not entertaining, and Rolly...
Everything I said about Devon earlier also applies to Rolly. You're only online famous, where a lot of the content is free. This is not the kind of stuff you get up and get out of bed and pay wads of cash for.
Because you're only online famous.
All of his little funny interviews and funny sound bites are only funny when it's free. Charge people $75, $80 to see it. Stops being funny real fucking fast.
You gotta be joking.
It's a joke that isn't funny. So if they don't fight, and Devon sits out the rest of the year, I don't really care.
Same with Rolly.
I don't really care. They don't fight. Don't fight. Somebody else will.
Kinda Benn and Regis Prograis are about to. The former champion Regis Prograis, who asks, how am I an underdog? Is Conor Benn younger? Yes. Is he stronger and faster too? Possibly. But should that make him the favorite? Considering the belts Prograis has won, and the names he's knocked off along the way, he doesn't believe so. To the people, I'm an underdog. But I feel like I'm not, Prograis told The Ring recently. How am I an underdog if you check the resume? How many world champions did I fight? How many world champions did I beat?
In total, Prograis has fought 5 former or current world champions. Going 3-2 in those bouts where Conor Benn has fought just one. A long-faded Chris Algieri back in 2021, Prograis has also gotten over the championship hump twice, a box Benn has yet to tick off on. However, what's in the Brits' favor heading into their April 11th clash at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, live on Netflix this weekend, is momentum. In back-to-back fights, Benn has moved up to the middleweight division to face Chris Eubank Jr. In their first meeting last April, Benn lost, a close unanimous decision. In their immediate November rematch, Benn dominated, dropping Eubank twice in the 12th en route to a decision. Prograis, on the other hand, has been showing his age. The 37-year-old is just 1-2 in his last 3, and when last seen, he picked up a win over Jojo Diaz, but struggled against a much smaller fighter.
Smaller fighter who's won just 2 out of his last 10 fights.
You're wondering why you're the underdog going in, Regis? That's why. Because you shouldn't be struggling with a Jojo Diaz. That's the kind of guy who, in your prime, you probably would have knocked him out.
Would have hurt him.
Based on what I saw, it was Jojo Diaz that hurt you several times throughout the course of your fight, and
Jojo is naturally smaller, never been big on power. He's not a knockout merchant, but he still managed to hurt you several times.
that's why you're the underdog, Regis Prograis, who's fighting Conor Benn at 150-pound catch weight, would admit that he hasn't looked like his normal self in quite some time. Still, he's fully convinced that he's still an elite fighter. I've been a world champion twice. I've been number 1 in the world twice already, he said. I think Conor Benn will never be number 1 in the world. I'm world level.
Maybe you were.
But that may not be what you are. Fighting at 150 pounds? That's junior middleweight, where Regis Prograis has yet to have fought as a welter. Against real welters, it seems a very hard pill for these fighters to swallow when Father Time has finally caught up to them.
But that's why Regis is the underdog going in. That and other reasons. Rumors of an injury.
It was Eddie Hearn that stated he heard it on the grapevine that the fight between Regis and Conor might get cancelled because Regis is injured. To that, Regis said, I'm good to fight for sure. Regis Prograis denies being injured going into this weekend's contest.
Nothing's going on with me, bro. For me, I don't even know where that came from. But I didn't really address it or nothing like that. Nothing's wrong with me at all. So maybe somebody out there is trying to stop the fight or whatever, and they're saying things like that, but there's nothing going on with me. I'm good. I'm good to fight, for sure. One person we know, I saw in an interview, Eddie Hearn said that. Eddie said, oh, he's injured, he's this, like, why would Eddie go and say that? Like, why? What's the purpose? What is he trying to do? Maybe because Eddie did promote both of us and so he's not in on this. Maybe that's why?
These are just my thoughts. In this situation, I don't see a reason for Eddie Hearn to lie about Regis being injured, but I do see a reason for Regis to lie.
About not being injured.
Because he needs the money. Here at 37 years old, in the twilight years of his career, this is an opportunity to make a lot of money on a very big show, a co-main event, and you can't afford to miss out on that due to some injury, so you act like nothing's wrong.
Eddie actually has less reason to lie about Regis being injured than Regis.
Thus, his current circumstances, in tandem with his age, and rumors swirling about a potential injury that he's hiding, all encompass why, in spite of being the more experienced and accomplished fighter going into the fight, he's the underdog.
Conor Benn may not be anything special, but perhaps he doesn't need to be to beat today's Regis Prograis.